Call this meeting to order. This is the regular school board meeting of the Northfield Public Schools. It is Monday, October 13th. And Dr. Richardson, we had a couple items in our table file.
Yes, you'll see there are some personnel items, including appointments and increase, decrease, and change in assignments. You also notice we have a resignation this evening from our child nutrition director. And she's, are we at liberty to say?
Oh, it's been announced.
Yes.
She's going to Richfield
Going
as
to
their
Richfield.
shop, which is minutes from her home.
Yeah. So in the end, that's a tough choice, but we wish her well. And then also we want to share with you again an update on district master facilities, and in your materials you have an updated long-range facilities planning stakeholder meeting sheet, and we'll talk a little bit about what's happened with those meetings so far, since we just completed number 10 out of 17 this evening.
All right, very good. If there's no objection, we'll add these to the agenda as we move forward. Move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the district to address the board. I'm assuming there's no one here to address the board? All right. We will move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packets the minutes from the last school board meeting, which were held on September 22nd. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Ann. Seconded by Rob. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Announcements and recognition.
Okay, and I have several announcements this evening. First of all, the Torch Initiative was among the 10 recipients of the $1.3 million in college-ready grants that were awarded by Great Lakes Higher Education Guarantee Corporation. The $55,660 grant from Great Lakes will fund rigorous extracurricular instruction in math and English to help 56 of our Northfield High School juniors and seniors ultimately pass college-level courses. 56 students will be members of the Torch cohort, which serves youth who are low-income, students of color, or potential first-generation college attendees. So again, congratulations to Torch for continuing to generate dollars to help support their program. We'd like to recognize one of our Northfield High School senior artists in the art department, Noah Heil. We'll be having a solo art show on display at the Paradise Center for the Arts in Faribault. Paradise Center director contacted art teacher Catherine Norrie in late August, asked her for a student who would be a great fit for their student gallery. Noah Heil was a clear choice. Noah developed a strong style and a passion for painting in both Mrs. Norrie's watercolor painting class and drawing and painting class during his junior year. So she was more than happy to offer his name as extremely strong and deserving candidate for this honor. Noah has his amazing watercolor and acrylic paintings from his junior year on display at the Paradise until November 11th of this year, and the opening reception was back on Friday, October the 3rd. We're also pleased to announce that Northfield High School has 3 National Merit Commended Scholars. They're Evan Pack, Alexander Batiste, and Benjamin Andrew. We'd like to congratulate each of these students and their parents, and the high school will be hosting a reception for these students and their families before the Monday, November 10th board meeting. The reception will begin at 6:15, so the board meeting can start at its normal time of 7 p.m. We'd also like to congratulate the Community Services Division. They were awarded a Rice County Public Health Statewide Health Improvement Plan, or SHIP grant, for a neighborhood mini grant of $4,500 to use toward efforts at the Greenville Park Community School. And again, what we're seeing now is the ability with the Greenville Park Community School to really garner some additional grant dollars to help support really getting that program off the ground. These grant dollars will be used to establish a healthy Greenville Park family meal and open recreation spaces for community use. We are not able to use funds from the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant to cover the items that now are going to be covered by the SHIP grant. So again, creativity and hard work pay off. And then finally, on a sad note, the Northfield Public Schools family is currently mourning the loss of our colleague, Darcy Sawyer today. Darcy played a vital role in supporting students as a social studies teacher at the Area Learning Center. I know several board members have seen her in the past in presentations to kids at the end of the year. For almost a decade, teaching summer school, as well as social studies and coaching volleyball at the middle school. Darcy will be remembered as an excellent teacher, a fabulous colleague, and an individual who truly made a difference for students. She will be missed, but we'll hold her memory in our hearts forever. We keep Darcy's husband and 3 children, the ALC staff and students in our thoughts as they all go through this very difficult time. So just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of that situation. Thank you.
Any other announcements? All right. We are ready to move on to our first item for discussion report, and we have Bill North here representing the Friends of the Northfield Public Library. And board members, you should have had in your packet some information from the public library, and Bill's going to be presenting some more.
First of all, I'd like to really thank the board for providing me some time to bring this project in its current state. You've probably been hearing about it in the Northfield News and on city council reports, etc., for the last 6 months. It's a project with a pretty quick timeline for capital projects, and so I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk about the library, where we stand now, and kind of update you and offer you the opportunity to ask questions about the current design, which will be moving to City Council starting at their work session tomorrow, and then we hope for a vote next week at their council meeting. In the materials that I submitted earlier, I gave you a bit of a timeline on our library. Much of it is probably very familiar to all of you. What I think is worth noting is that this library planning process, even though it has been quite quick, the City Council first brought this idea, in the City Administrator Madigan brought this idea last November to the library board as an idea, a different way of thinking about getting something done right for the library in a timely way. And it's been moving faster and faster as decisions were taken. But I think one of the crucial things that has allowed us to move forward in this process with some confidence is the amount of groundwork that had happened over the previous decade when other library expansions, other community conversations about the library had already occurred. All that data was not set aside, but instead it was incorporated, and then once the approval by the City Council was given, it was updated with further conversations during the summertime, and in particular with input by the design team, which consists of library staff who in some ways know the use patterns, the user groups, the programming needs, the pinch points in the current building very, very well as city staff in engineering and elsewhere. So they're the design team that has been working very closely with the architects. The architecture firm was chosen in part because of their kind of comprehensive approach to the design process. They work with a number of partners that allow them to address issues such as engineering and costing out plans in a real-time way. And so we felt like they were bringing a lot to the table in terms of this planning process. And again, a planning process that was quite rapid. So they've really been great. They've been down in Northfield a lot. And I think they really appreciate the gem that our library is. They really like our library, and they want to enhance it in ways that keep the old, that we love, and make it serve us better. So this process has been very important, and the history of this process has all flowed in to a lot of the key design ideas and goals. project goals were kept fairly straightforward and simple, though they obviously ramify. First, flexibility. There's a lot of discussion continually in the media and certainly in library circles about withered libraries. Will they go all tech? Will there be books? What do patrons need in the library of the 21st century? And in some ways, deciding an answer to that question is difficult, and it depends on who you listen to. It depends on your community. I think one of the things that flexibility in this design does is it allows the library to adjust as our community's needs adjust, as the technological frontier adjusts. And so that's why flexibility in the design process is a key goal. Likewise, accessibility. I think anyone who has visited the library when it's snowy, icy, will know that there are a lot of issues in the approach to the library that have been long-standing. There are also issues within the library. Many of the shelves are quite narrow, they're very tall, and they're very low. And so for anyone who is smaller or has difficulty bending down, the narrowness of the shelves, etc., makes the collection itself less accessible. And so accessibility was really a key goal that was emphasized by the library board and the design team throughout this process. Finally, efficiency. We have an incredible library staff. They do so much with so comparatively little for the number of patrons that they serve on a daily basis. They do incredible programming for kids, for adults, and all of that takes time and a lot of labor, actually, in a library, currently structured as it is. For example, when you drop off your books in the book drop actually drops into a little crawl space. And to get the books out, somebody has to go into that crawl space and pull out, sort of like a dwarf in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, pushing a little truck. All of that means that the library staff is not able to work as efficiently as they could if their areas were consolidated. And so that was another goal, to make operations of the library happen as smoothly and as effortlessly as possible. This is a design plan, and actually I should, let me just talk about the design plan. One of the key things about this design plan is what's called the commons area. That's the new construction, major new construction, that will occur on the Washington Street side. It is a glassed area, and the real intention of that is both to provide new meeting spaces, new collaborative spaces, but also it allows the architects and the library to pull out the current staircase, thereby liberating that interior space of the library and allowing the staff circulation areas to be organized more efficiently, opening out that first level so that children's can be expanded easily into the area currently occupied by the circulation, and doing a number of things that will just create a very open flow pattern on the main floor that will allow it to be reconfigured as programming needs emerge. You can have multiple programming on the first floor, which now is not possible. The commons can be converted into a lecture space, a concert space, a reception area, all while maintaining other operations in the library going full at their normal rate. So in a lot of ways, the commons area is the architectural key, the linchpin that will allow a lot of really exciting transformations to happen on the inside. Upstairs, there is not as much change, in part because they really love the Carnegie Library. And the upstairs is really where that library's architecture and design is most evident. What will happen is the technology areas will be reconfigured, brought up to date. Additional computers will be added. And where there is the commons area, there'll be a kind of balcony built out that will extend both the area for people to work with their own devices, but also it can be a collaborative space, and there'll be some tech-ready areas at the back wall facing into the library. This does buy us more just seating area for people, and also this also gets us more stack space. Currently, the library, as many of you probably know, basically is continually evaluating its collection because they have no more room for it to grow. This will create some space for that to happen. Two other things that are perhaps particularly relevant to school-aged kids are the two blue rooms. Currently the library has no small meeting rooms that can actually have small conferences, tutoring sessions. The plan is to create two of those, one larger, one smaller, that can be used by anyone to have small group meetings, projects, collaborations. And we think this will be very good for students in the after-school period, but it will also be a benefit to people who do some of their small business work at the library, but don't really have a place right now to engage in more confidential conversations on the phone. So we think there are a lot of very exciting parts of this plan, and I think we, being the Capital Campaign Committee and the Library Board, have really been encouraged by the enthusiasm that the library staff has shown for this. They're very excited about this project. Just some images. So this is the Washington Street view. In terms of accessibility, one of the critical things that we hope to do in the outer part of the area leading up is to introduce a sidewalk all the way along Washington in front of the library. Currently, there's only a small patch of concrete, and if you aren't there during the winter, life can get very exciting. So that's one of the principal goals, and we think that will make it much safer and much easier to use the library for a lot of different patrons. 3rd Street remains untouched. So there were earlier plans where 3rd Street might be modified. There are no such plans in this program. There's a look from above. Just to one of the things that we've been encouraged about is the response of the 2 team members of the library board. There are 2 members of the Mayor's Youth Council who sit on the library board and have a vote. They share a vote. And I think it's been really gratifying to see their response to this plan, which is we really like it. We like open spaces. We like flexible spaces where we can come in, we can move the chairs around, we can feel like the entire library is ours, which in the current configuration, they've said, you know, we've got that teen area and it's almost like a little box. We like our collections together so we can find the materials we're looking for, but we don't want to just feel like that's our library. We want access to the whole library. And that response was really exciting. And so we think that this is a design, just on a personal note, this design actually got the attention of my 14-year-old daughter. You know, she looked at the design and she's like, oh, wow, oh, yes. So that was encouraging, if anecdotal. The other thing that the architects really thought about, and I don't think we were necessarily expecting this, but they took a look at the comprehensive building and they noticed that wall as you face the library from Division, and they started imagining, what if we just pulled that wall down a bit and created a terrace there? Wi-Fi is accessible from the building outside. And it really becomes a work area, a collaborative area when the weather is good, and it can be a really great area for summer reading programs, for all sorts of activities. And it's sort of another space that I don't think we expected. So these are some of what we see as the design benefits and outcomes. On the PowerPoint slide, I've bolded the ones that seem most relevant to people who are in our schools, students. Light-filled open glass commons, flexible space, popular collections, individual seating, and room for events. More space to read, study, and collaborate, small meeting and study rooms, additional computers, additional outdoor seating on porch and division overlook, and more space for collections. All of these seem like things that will help the library complement what the school libraries already do, what the schools already do. And with the digital upgrade, digital Empower upgrade that the library had last year, the idea of the library becoming a community access point for digital devices that they may be using in schools becomes, I think, there are more places for people to actually use those, their technology. So how much does this cost? In design phase 2, which is the current plan that's moving toward the council work session tomorrow, it's costed out at a total project price of around $2.1 million. Of that, 1.7 is construction. The city of Northfield has committed $1 million already. The Bunday Family Gift Fund are funds that the library already has in its gift funds, and they've been earmarked for capital. The Friends and Foundation have, since really we had designs to work with, which would be mid-August, been working hard on a private fundraising campaign that will continue. We're committed to this, and we have people in Northfield who have said, I'd love to contribute, but I'd like to make a multi-year pledge. We want to make that happen. Thus far, we've been going for about 6 weeks. We have about $160,000 in cash and pledges in hand. We have a number of people who have said, yes, I'll do something. I'll tell you later what I'm going to do. So, we're at that phase, but I think this has been a project where we've only had a building to talk about for about a month and a half. And it's difficult to fundraise for something that is purely abstract. So we have been trying to get out and talk to people about the project. And from what we've been getting, people, I think, are excited about the possibility of something like this happening for the library. It's clear that Northfield loves its library, and we love it too, and we want to see it get really what it needs to support us as a community into the next century. And then there are, these things which you are probably well aware of. Remaining informed about the project, and I think talking with city council members about what you think of the project. And I think one of the things that I'd like to emphasize is just the opportunity that city council's willingness to commit to this project back in the spring really has meant. It's really been an opportunity that we didn't necessarily see coming in any of in the near future. And this has really created this wonderful chance to do something good for the library and do it really quite expeditiously. So we're very thankful, actually, for that. And I think that should be, at least it's a really big part of the message I give to my council members. And then finally, support the capital campaign if you want to. And then questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Board members, questions? John?
Just a question about the design in terms of the space needs. There's a small expansion there for the atrium.
Right.
And I guess one of the plans is always, that has often been talked about, is expanding the library to the north.
Right.
And I guess in terms of how you arrived at this as best meeting the needs of the community and the library, If you could just explain that to a little bit.
Sure. Well, I think one dimension of it is back in 2006 when there was extensive investigation of different possibilities for expanding the library. They did a lot of investigation about the possibility of expanding north. The owners of the buildings to the north are not particularly interested in selling, so that's a factor. And the other thing is that our current design is it flows out of essentially a more budget-driven process, which is that we began with this idea that City Administrator Madigan floated. What could you do with $1 million? $1.3 million or so. And we were working from there. To expand to the north would have involved property acquisition prices, and pretty quickly that budget would have been exhausted. And fundamentally, I think one of the nice things that at least has been a positive is that this is a design that really does seem to satisfy Library Director Jensen and the library staff. So in a sense, they're not looking for a massively bigger building. And in part, this comes from a kind of idea that they have that they would like the library, yes, to be a robust, vibrant community center on site, but they also want to get the library out into the community. So they're doing much more in terms of partnerships and outreach. And one of the things about staff efficiencies is that it gives staff more time to actually do that kind of outreach, like go out on Booker to different daycare centers, go out on Booker to the Y, and have a site there where there's story time. All of that takes staff time, and if we can free up that staff time in the main building, it becomes available. So, it's certainly certain areas, the original initial design, phase 1 from the architects had a bump out, if I can point, had a bump out in this area. That is something that was taken off in terms of controlling costs, but it's also an item that can come back very easily. It's sort of a discrete element, and so that's why it came off, but it's also something where if the needs of the community reveal that there is more space that's needed, there are some opportunities there that can be used. Does that?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Anne, did you?
He answered my question.
Oh, sorry. Other questions? No?
This is the second time I've sat in on discussion on this, and I really think it's a nice design. I've talked to the people who feel libraries are at a crossroads right now, with technology being more digital than it is, and also the paper and print.
Exactly.
So I think this is a nice compromise. I'm pleased that we can also support and encourage you with it.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Julie?
I just have a comment. Thank you for doing this presentation, and I think that you're right, just having these pictures is going to generate a lot of excitement. It's really so fun to see, and I think we'd be remiss in not thanking Friends of the Library and the library for everything you do for our students.
Oh, sure.
The number of ways we're able to collaborate with you and provide so many additional opportunities for our students we wouldn't be able to provide. So thank you
It's
so
a
much
pleasure.
for that.
Really is a pleasure.
I guess one question, Bill, just for my clarity.
Sure.
It appears that, at least from the drawing, then, that on the Washington side, you have a way to, with a longer ramp, get to the doors without having to use any steps.
There is.
Am I seeing that if we go clear down to the end?
Like there?
Where the trees are?
Yeah.
That there's actually a way so that people who would find the steps difficult have a way from either end of the building
Yeah.
to basically get on one floor.
Yeah. So there's And this is actually currently here.
Okay.
The thing is that this now is the sidewalk.
All right.
That substitutes for the actual sidewalk, which I think, and this is a very steep hill. So that ramp will remain, and one of the things the architects worked very hard on is trying to figure out a way of possibly ramping into the whole facility, like grading it in such a way. And they simply couldn't do it within the space while maintaining the change in elevation that the codes required. So it really was a matter of extending down. But yes, you're right that they're reconfiguring the access sidewalk from 3rd Street as well.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that has come up in just about every conversation, both the public meetings about these plans, but also when we've been out talking with people, is really taking the time to get that area right. On the Division Street side, unfortunately, not much is going to change in terms of that stairway. They did investigate a possibility of an elevator, and that was cost prohibitive. But they're really interested in making this as accessible as possible, and particularly making it very safe. So one of the things that came up at a meeting over the weekend were railings along the ramps. So right now, I mean, these are more conceptual designs, so once they get into the details, I would expect more to appear. But just remembering that ramps aren't necessarily easy either, and that if you have balance issues, a big open sidewalk is not necessarily a very comfortable space to navigate. And so I think they're looking at railings along the ramps, along the sidewalks going in. And also being very attentive to making sure that that area, wherever there's the possibility of water pooling, that there's adequate drainage, whether through the materials used or through creating the right draining surfaces. So, yeah.
I guess I'm very impressed with the visual look of the glass space, and the fact that that really does create now this kind of really a focal point in terms of the entry into the library, and was just wanting to get a sense of with now a sidewalk that runs the entire distance and then the ramp added, it seems like that really changes the ability for people to get to the library and get into the library from what we have right now.
Yeah, and I think particularly if you're ever near the library, as people are getting in and out of their cars, they really often have to go out into the street in order to enter a car. And if you've got little kids or you've got multiple things you're worrying about, that's not the ideal. And I think this allows you some other possibilities.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I just had a couple comments too. That I think, given how difficult the site is, but that I think you did a survey a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and everybody wanted the library to stay put. That it's really remarkable what the team has come up with
Yeah.
the design. So in terms of your capital campaign, are you have to reach a certain goal before you can move forward with the next steps, or?
So this is going to be, I think, the substance of the discussions tomorrow at the council work session. I know that Teresa and Teresa and the city administrator and the city finance director have been in a lot of discussions about just what financing could look like on a project like this, and I think they are really exploring a wide variety of solutions. We're very excited as a Friends group, as a capital campaign committee, to be part of a public-private collaboration, and so we're very hopeful that whatever solutions that they come up with will allow this project to go forward, because it's a really nice project to talk about. It's a very nice project to advocate for, but we're working on that. But there have been a lot of discussions. I think they're very aware of things like timing, about the different ways in which parts of this project, for example, there's an HVAC upgrade that was scheduled for the library anyway, and so that may be a project savings that will come down, and that would be very nice. But that's sort of the substance of the next council discussions.
Well, we'll stay tuned.
And I think you have appropriate mood music, to back this up now. I'm waiting for kind of the shaft of light to come down, shine on your head.
Well, we really appreciate,
Thank you very
Bill,
much.
you coming in. I know you're on to your next board meeting, so
Yep.
thank you so much for staying.
Thank
for
you
questions.
for taking this time. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We are now on to our next item, which is the World's Best Workforce Plan Update. Orchestrated to the music.
Yes,
Our
orchestrated
music timing
music.
is just a little bit off.
Having, as we move forward, is knowing that we need to be able to share with you the plan moving forward into the 2014-15 year. Again, knowing that the last presentation was really looking back at 13-14. But the other discussion we had, and Hope and Mary were very quick to respond, was when we talked about the concept of could we create a scorecard, a matrix, a way to really look at the metrics of the kinds of measurements that we would be using to help us understand where we are. We know that's going to benefit us. It will also benefit Northfield Promise as we move forward, and hopefully will give people the opportunity to see the impact of using a broad set of measures as opposed to getting hung up on there's only one measurement in the world, there's only one game in town, and that's the NCA. I think you'll see in the presentation tonight how they have very skillfully looked at a whole group of different metrics that will help us look at how we're doing in terms of world's best workforce. So with that, as the music dies down, you're ready to go.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is quite the music we would have chosen, but it is beautiful nonetheless. So thank you for your time this evening. We really appreciate this. And Hope Langston is our district assessment coordinator, and we're going to include a lot of data in this report. So we called it the Plan and Data Report. So these are the components of the world's best workforce, and I'm sure the first 5 look very familiar to you because they were part of our plan last March when we presented it, and part of our report, and also the headings on our website with the links underneath. The first 5 are provided to us by the State Department. They're going to look at all children ready for kindergarten, achieving literacy by 3rd grade, closing the achievement gaps, all students career college ready, and all students graduating from high school. We have added the 6th component, school climate and student engagement, because again, as Dr. Richardson said, we believe not only in looking just at one data point, but in looking at multiple data points and looking at the whole student, the whole learner. So,
Okay, so what you see in front of you are the metrics that we would use to not only measure our progress towards the world's best workforce requirements, but also what we would use as a district as we move along the continuous improvement cycle. There are 30 data points tonight. We're obviously not going to cover them all in great depth because we would be here for a very long time. But please know that the schools themselves will be presenting school-specific data as they bring their SIP plans to you later on in the next few weeks.
So we begin with all students ready for kindergarten. And here are some of the things we have going. And of course, we're going to start with a bunch of new letters. We have the IGDs, and that stands for Individual Growth and Development Indicators. And that's a preschool assessment. And we use it right now with our Hand in Hand and with the 4- and 5-year-olds at preschool screening. So of course, this doesn't get to all of our
preschool students. We do, after talking with Caroline, we figured we'd reach between 20 and 33% of the incoming kindergartners with the IGDs. Hopefully we'll be able to increase that number as we go. And of course, this is the first implementation of that, so we don't have a lot of data at this point. The Northfield Kindergarten academic benchmarks are common assessments developed by the 12 kindergarten teachers that attended our two-day work session this summer. And again, obviously it was developed in June, so we're using it this year. And the kindergarten teachers did a wonderful job, and they're very much behind this, so we'll have more data as we go on this. Child at a Glance forms, again, were developed this summer in conjunction with the Northfield Promise. And what that is a checklist that the parents or family members fill out before school starts at Ready, Set, Go Day, and then the teachers fill out the same form. And we're having a Carleton statistical consulting class run some statistical analysis of these to see how accurate they were. And that will be done this semester. So we should have some very interesting data on our preschool readiness. Again, our challenge is getting all students.
So as we move along the continuum past kindergarten, the next requirement for World's Best Workforce, and if you see it underlined in the chart, you know that that's a World's Best Workforce component requirement. If it's not underlined, which would be the climate and student engagement, that's a Northfield added piece. So, yes. Okay. The kindergarten team decided, as a group of 3 elementary schools working together this summer collaboratively, and we were part of that process for the entire day, and it was fantastic. They decided that the MAP testing for math provided a useful metric for them in the classroom. They felt like the math literacy test did not give them as much instructional direction as they would have liked, which is why they worked together to develop their own common formative assessment in that kindergarten academic benchmark booklet. However, this fall, all 3 schools did test the kindergartners in math. You can see the results. We obviously have an incoming class that has a varying degree of academic needs. I felt it was just interesting to show you kind of where our starting point is for kids coming into the Northfield Public Schools. So moving on to 3rd grade, and the overarching goal is that our students would be reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. So in that vein, we have our MCA results. I want you to keep in mind that, again, we're starting at a very high level, and you're going to see that all of our data points that we collect on kids do not always align. So please keep that in mind, because you're going to see some varying results depending on which assessment was used. So if you look at our grade 3 reading proficiency results, you can see that we mirrored the state in a downward trend in 2013 when the test rigor increased to match with the Common Core. Then this year in 2014 was the first year that our students took that test online. We weren't sure what impact that was going to have with the switch from pencil to paper to online. We obviously have some work to do in adjusting our curriculum to match this increased rigor in the test. Our 3rd graders also take the math test. And there you can see a different metric. And just think about our classroom teachers, again, using multiple pieces of data to get a complete picture of their student needs. In the MAP test, we continue to outperform the national average. We did see a drop this year, but we have continued to exceed the national average, and our students generally look very strong on this benchmark assessment. So the next component, closing the achievement gap. And there's several pieces of information that we need to keep in mind when we're looking at that. First and foremost would be our growth. Not only do we worry about proficiency level of our students, but also are we growing them from year to year. So in MCA, they calculate the growth using something called a Z-score. And in reading, this comes directly from the Minnesota report card. If you haven't been to that site, I highly recommend it. It has tons of information about our student performance. And what you can see are the numbers of kids and the percentages that we actually recorded low growth, medium growth, and high growth from one MCA to the next. So obviously at elementary, third graders are not included in this count of students. Low growth students who are proficient are highly unlikely to remain proficient. Low growth students who are non-proficient are highly likely to remain non-proficient. The state has done a lot of statistical analysis of all student data. What you want is high growth for your non-proficient students because they are more highly likely to become proficient if they experience high growth. Medium growth students who are proficient are likely to stay that way. Medium growth students who are non-proficient are unlikely to become proficient. So to move our non-proficient kids, we need to get them to have high growth. Now you can see the state on the left, Northfield on the right. I think it's hard for you to read the print, but I will tell you that we have a lower percentage of kids in the low growth category. We have a slightly higher percentage in the medium growth category, and we're about at the same for the state in high growth. And that would be in reading. The same thing for math. Lower percentage in low growth students, about right at the state average in medium growth, and we exceed the state average in our high growth students by about 5%. Again, this is a one-year measurement, so this is 13 to 14. It's not a rolling average, it's just one data point in time. So that were growth scores for all of our students. We also have growth targets in our math testing. This looks a little bit different. And the reason for this is that NWEA computes a growth target for students that is a true mean for average growth at that grade level across the country. Their sample size is obviously much larger than the MCA growth target. So where we see 48% of our students meeting their growth target in reading from spring to spring, the true mean nationwide would be 50%. So we're just slightly below that. Obviously, there's room for improvement there and something that we'll be looking at the building level as well. In math, we do a little bit better. Kind of the opposite, actually. 52% met their growth target. Then we begin to drill down a little bit deeper into our subgroup performance. The MMR and the focus ratings are waiver data, and that really is telling us how we are doing as a school and a district in closing the achievement gap. Now, MMR ratings, that's a 5-year history. You can see that there's quite a bit of variability in this calculation. I'm going to be honest with you, in my new role as District Assessment Coordinator, I'm really still learning about what all of this means and how we can translate this into meaningful information for our teachers. So what I've learned along the way so far is that really you want to look at the pieces that are making up this MMR rating. And for MMR, it's 4 components. It's your proficiency rate, it's your achievement gap, It's your growth, again, growth plays a part in this, and then it's your graduation rate if you're a high school. What they're really looking at here is comparing your subgroups against your majority groups. And how did those students perform in comparison, and then in comparison to the same subgroup demographic across the state. The focus rating focuses on two elements, and that's your achievement gap and your growth, your focused growth. This is really drilling down into how are your subgroups doing against your majority population. So it's essentially removing the whites from the scoring and really looking at the difference between your subgroup, how your subgroup performed. Again, quite a bit of variability in the ratings. So one thing that we have been looking at as we've gone along is our subgroup growth. I've been spending a lot of time looking at this by building, by grade level. So we just are highlighting ELs and FRP for you this evening. This is from the state website as well, looking at, for our ELs versus the state, what percentage were high growth, medium growth, and low growth. And that's in reading. And then we have EL performance, growth performance in math. FRP performance in reading. And our FRP performance in math. We are working with the buildings to break this down by grade level, by subgroup, so that they can really zero in on the needs within their building and the trends over time for areas that they can target in their instruction. Okay, so not only do we want growth, we also look at just straight proficiency level for our subgroups. For the 2014 cohort, this would be our English language reading proficiency against the state average. And then in math, which again we are starting because of this downward trend, looking at what was the growth versus what was the proficiency to try to zero in on where we are facing some challenges. FRP reading above the state average. And FRP math. So moving on to the next component, which would be all students are career and college ready. We obviously use a continuum of assessments starting in kindergarten all the way through grade 12. It's just lovely. They're happy about this page, apparently. So what we've done is basically just look at MAP performance for each grade level for this year. Again, exceeding the mean, but knowing that to achieve proficiency on our state test, you have to score above, you need to score above our mean, score above the national mean on MAP. Math, same way, we do quite well, exceeding the national average in every grade level. MCA results for the district as a whole, that would be reading. and science. Again, we exceed the state average in every content area. So as part of the career and college ready continuum, we now have 3 tests which we have always given in Northfield in recent years, which are now a state requirement. So in that respect, we are nicely positioned to meet the state requirement this year. I've been at meetings where there are districts who've never given the Explore or the plan and are sort of having to set themselves up to do that this year. So we feel fortunate that we have this already in place. Our 2013 results, last year's, again exceeding the national average in each subtest and in composite scores. And that is our entire 8th grade that does take that test. And then our plan test, which is given to our 10th graders. Again, we currently give that to all 10th graders, so it will not be anything new this year except for it is a state requirement, that little piece. But we have also done very well in that, exceeding the national average in each subtest as well. And then last year's ACT results, Northfield versus the state and the nation. This year it will be given to all 11th graders on April 28th. That's the state testing day. Whoopsie. And then our AP results, the 5-year trend, again impressive for Northfield, exceeding Minnesota and global averages for students scoring 3 or above. So all of those tests are tracking kids as they move through our system and head towards senior year. The next plan component that is required is that all students graduate. The metric is found on the MDE site, which is our graduation rates, again exceeding the state average. And finally, climate and student engagement, that's the piece that we are adding in our district as a piece of World's Best Workforce. So for student engagement, we are looking at attendance rates. Again, available on your Minnesota State report card. So you can see that our attendance rate hovers the mid-90s. And finally, to measure climate within our district, we have the annual building climate surveys. These are the 2014 results. Parents responding to the statement, overall the school meets my students' academic and social needs. So we collect a lot of data on kids. And the challenge is to make it useful to teachers and to other stakeholders in the district with the ultimate goal of raising student achievement. So we want to take a look at who uses this data and how.
So these are the levels of student data review, and we start with the District Educational Parent Advisory Committee, otherwise known as DPAC. And again, we keep that data very much at the district level, a very high level of data examination. And then we drill down a little deeper at each site. The school buildings will be giving their site improvement plans and reports in the next 4 board meetings. And so you'll hear a lot about their school data meeting. And that data is also used at staff meetings, and the professional learning communities drill all the way down to the student level. Some best practices we have in place to increase student achievement. As you know, we've been implementing PBIS at the middle school, high school, and area learning center. We're in our second and last year of training for that. We are doing professional development for teachers, social emotional supports. Last November, we had Danielle Tice, a behavior consultant, do some training with the staff, and she's returning this November to move beyond the once and done, but to come back and follow through. And the teachers have submitted suggestions and things they would like her to talk about this year after hearing her last year. English learners instructional strategies, we're working on that a lot because if you notice in our data, our English learners are not quite at the achievement level we'd like, so we're going to keep working on that. And of course, we're still working on response to intervention. We do our continuous improvement in all curricular areas, working on doing some formative common district assessments, and we're doing that in the PLC process. And we are really working on instructional coaching, both from the RTI coaches and from cognitive coaching throughout the district. Some new initiatives that we have begun this year, the community school at Greenville Park, which we've heard a lot about, and we're hoping, we've had some conversations about even how we can incorporate some parent meetings for English learners and for Title I parents as part of the community school. The Child at a Glance form and that ongoing research project with Carleton. Literacy work, we spent today and we have tomorrow with a literacy consultant from the Level of Literacy from Heinemann Publishing to give us a lot of good instructional ideas, especially for use as a Tier 2 intervention with our English language learners. Summer work, we had two groups work last year. We had the kindergarten teachers meet, and then we had a group at Bridgewater that met to do a scope and sequence of literacy. Both were outstandingly successful. So in planning budgets for this year, we have set aside money for the availability for all elementary teachers to work in June for 2 days. We're probably going to concentrate in the areas of literacy. We haven't finalized those plans yet, and developing some common assessments that will be used throughout all 3 buildings in the area of literacy. Mechatronics at the high school and some other collaborative efforts, and again, I don't want to steal their thunder. You'll hear about that more when the high school gives their report. And then, of course, we've got the Northfield Promise Action Teams that are up and running. And as the Northfield Public Schools, we're a partner with Northfield Promise and very heavily involved. And I know we're working on Ready for K and social, emotional, and physical support for 4th graders. And we've just started the reading by 3rd grade action committee. So, and you'll hear more about those too from Northfield Promise. Another part of World's Best Workforce is to have a parent advisory committee. And again, Northfield has had this in place for years. So we aren't rushing. I notice when I read some of the newspaper articles, it's like, we had to have this parent meeting, and so we had one. We have an ongoing committee that does some great work in developing district-wide goals. And we already have our meetings scheduled for this year, and that's part of the ongoing requirements for World's Best Workforce. And when we saw that, we went, yay, we've already got that one in place. And then we have to notify you of the public meetings. And on September 22nd, you had the report where we went through the website on World's Best Workforce. Tonight, you've got the plan and data report. And then looking forward all the way to May 2015, the DPAC people will present their broad district goals on that evening. So we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board members, questions? Bob?
I was, excuse me, the part of this, that doesn't look good is when the thing goes way down.
Are you looking at 3rd grade reading?
Well, all the ones that go way down in 2013 because of the Common Core and the new
Change the test.
When they changed the test.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, you mentioned that part of this is new rigor in the test, and it's because of the implementation of the Common Core. So the question I have is just what progress is being made or what's being done to align the curriculum in Northfield to the Common Core requirements so that people who are taking the test are not surprised by the rigor of it or whatever.
Well, we did two things this summer. One, we started with the kindergarten teachers, and they took a very hard, long, day-long look at all of the Common Core standards and made assessments to go with each of those, and that's what we're hoping to do. It really takes all of the teachers to do it, not just a committee, so that's June work. And I know Bridgewater, do you want to speak about what
Sure.
Bridgewater did?
Yes. So we at Bridgewater took a big hit this year in third grade especially. And we immediately started to look at what we were doing instructionally that would have contributed or not contributed to the decline in scores. And one of the things that we quickly realized is that we did not have a scope and sequence in place that would allow us to have some steps along the way to see how our students were progressing in their mastery of the literacy standards. So one thing about this test, especially in grade 3, is it requires some reading stamina. And it requires reading stamina for passages that that child has not chosen. They may or may not be interested in that topic that's in front of them. The passages are long. The test is incredibly long for a third grader. And we realized that we need to incorporate some building of stamina this year and also some building in of reading and thinking critically about passages that may not be your choice. So we're trying to balance that out with what we know about good literacy practices. But the teachers have been quite attuned to this drop in scores. And that prompted the work that was done at Bridgewater this summer. And I know that Sibley and Greenville have also started the process of looking at literacy scope and sequence and some common assessments throughout the year to measure progress towards this standard by the end of the third grade year and beyond.
I guess my follow-up question would be, undoubtedly, in the next 10 years or sometime, they're going to change this again, and there's going to be another change in the test, and the Common Core will be replaced by something else. So as you're going through all of these changes, I mean, is there anything do you feel like you're getting something out of this that is beneficial other than just raising the test scores, trying to raise those test scores, or is it just responding to, oh, here's a test that we need to do better on?
No, I think what we all realized is, and we actually talked about this as a group of adults, we all need to read things that we don't necessarily choose. And it's a life skill. You still have to be able to look at that text, figure out what it means, and work with it. And we maybe, at least we felt at Bridgewater, had kind of moved away into too much maybe into student choice about what they're reading for a larger chunk of their day than maybe is beneficial to them. So it's not that we're teaching to the test, it's that we are understanding the skill that the student needs, and truly it is a life skill. So we're choosing to respond in that way. We also realize that this is one metric. When you look at our MAP scores, especially at Bridgewater, and you'll see it in our SIP, the students look a lot different in third grade on the MAP than they did on the MCA. So it's using these pieces of data together to formulate what we need to do in response to them.
And I think that's the point, that good teaching is going to be good teaching and reading is going to be reading. So even if some of the standards change a little bit, we can adjust with that. And we also are aligning our curriculum review with the Minnesota State review, because there's no sense, again, to look at something and then the state redoes it 2 years later, we'd be in a continual mess. So that's going to be part of it too. And having every teacher involved, every classroom teacher, not just a committee on the side, but having everyone know the standards and know what the changes could potentially be.
we know too, this is the ongoing discussion with the state, is that in their choice to change the test, our ability to create or look at long-term trend data is worthless. Because every time they change the test, and in fact, if you go in and look on their state report card, they will put they've got a little marking every time they've changed the test, and it says, if you put your cursor right over that arrow, it will say you can't use the data from the previous years to look at the years after that because we changed the test enough that the measures between the two are no longer valid. So there is some frustration there. And for us too is the idea that at the state level, the choice has been made to accept the entire English Language Arts Common Core. And so they really have worked in terms of the testing to revise that. In math, they're not there. And in fact, they've chosen to do a math test that they believe is more rigorous than the Common Core piece. So you also then have a situation for math where we're really trying to measure kids even above what the Common Core standards would tell us. I think the final piece that these guys mentioned to you that's really important to think about, and I think why we're looking at these 30 different data points for the matrix and the metrics that we're working with, is that data that you see for the map doesn't match data you see from the MCA. Data you see for the high school MCA in no way matches the scores we're seeing on the Explore, the Plan, and the ACT. And remember that the Explore and the Plan and the ACT are taken by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kids every year. They have huge ends that they use in terms of their base. So the data is much, in my mind, and I'm sure there would be some folks at the state that argue with me, but much more reliable data. The MCA data is really only for Minnesota, and it's only based on the testing that they do in Minnesota, the Minnesota students. So we've kind of taken the approach of saying it makes a lot more sense to have that broad set of metrics and really use all of those, as good teachers do, to say, this gives me a much more rounded picture of where children are than just looking at the MCA or the Z-score or the MMR score or the MAP score or the ACT or the Explore or the Plan, but looking at all of them together to try to make some sense out of where kids are going. And I really appreciate what Hope and Mary have done in terms of really broadening that matrix and the metrics that we're looking at, because we aren't quite yet to a dashboard, but that's kind of the next step in the process. Is we now really have kind of a scorecard that shows all the different things we're trying to do and multiple measures for each piece. And knowing that multiple measures may show us different results because of the specific testing and the specific questions that get asked.
Carrie?
Great report. I'm wondering if we can get the PowerPoint in digital form so we can see the colors, because I can't read this and I can't see
I can email that to you.
Okay.
Would you please? That would be great.
I have two questions, and they're, I think one is easy and one is maybe too big. But the one that I think is easy is I would like to hear a little bit more about the Carleton study and what they're trying to do with that. And the one that I think is really hard is, this is great to have all these different measurements for things, but as a practical matter, how does a classroom teacher make use of that data to deal with the students in the class?
Yeah, I was going to say, tell them about the composite. That's an easy one.
So one of the things that we've done at the elementary level is taken all of the literacy scores that we collect on kids, and there's more beyond this. Dibbles information, phonological screener information. And what we've done is, as our TI coaches, created a composite, a weighted composite, which really equalizes each of those scores that is going into that child. And that way, we are not overly relying on any one measure, but we are attempting to get the broadest look at that child that we can. That allows us to kind of rank them in order for services and considers everything that we're using on that student to assess them. So we're trying to use these globally for kids. It is hard for classroom teachers. I will admit that. I mean, it's hard for us to even look at all the data, and I'm sure it is for all of you. So really what I would like to see down the line is that these common assessments that teachers are developing for use in the classroom will be the most beneficial to them, and these will really be the summative end of year. You know where your kids are headed on the continuum as they get here. We don't want to find out in the spring that they aren't meeting standard. We should know that well before the spring. So our goal is to move the process of the steps along the way to these summative assessments. So I don't know if that answered it, Carrie, but we're trying to use all of the data that we collect on kids for instructional purposes.
Well, extraordinary amount of work. And just to add to that, anecdotally, what happened is we collect all this data, and you essentially get a green, yellow, red for DIBELS, for math, for all of these. And we would have teachers spending a lot of time going, well, this one's in red in nonsense words. Well, but this one's in red on map reading. And after the composite was developed and with weighted, and I think it was done in collaboration with Carleton.
They helped me with it statistically. Yes.
Right. So we were sure we had a decent composite, that now we can look at the composite score and not worry so much about each little individual thing and argue about, are nonsense words more important than map scores, that we can look at the composite and start there. And again, it's just a beginning point, but the composite that Hope and the Carleton class developed has been very, very useful. And what was your other question?
Well,
the Carleton
was
study.
about the Carleton study with the kindergarten assessment.
Child at a glance
Yeah.
form?
Yeah.
Okay, what happened was the family member filled it out as to readiness for kindergarten. Erin, do you know any of the questions?
I do.
Okay.
So that they were filling out, is it sometimes, always, no, always, rarely, sometimes, always, for self-help skills, some early academic skills, and then some social emotional skills. So the parent is filling out one, and we had over a 90% return rate, which was phenomenal from all 3 schools. The preschool teachers in town have also completed them. I think they have been given to all preschool and daycare providers.
Yeah, we think we have about a third. So we had more success getting them back from agency-based or organization-based than kind of home or family-based. So we have about a third of them completed by some sort of preschool program.
So we have the parent one, the preschool teacher one, if applicable, and then the third piece was the kindergarten teachers just a couple weeks ago, so about a month into the school year, completed it on a Google form, so completed electronically. Was this child ready for kindergarten, and did the same scale on the same questions that the parents had done. Carleton is now taking those, and they're looking for 2 things. One is, can we get some kind of measure about the impact of preschool experiences in Northfield? So parents were given quite a bit of data about where their kids went to school, how often, how many years worth of preschool experience did they have. So that's one piece of it, preschool experience. And then the second is trying to align parent reporting and preschool teacher reporting with actual kindergarten performance to see if they are in fact aligned. Is the child ready for kindergarten? Is there agreement amongst those 3 people completing the surveys? So there's really 2 pieces of that study.
4 points for the first time she took it to the second time. So I'm wondering when they actually capture that ACT score for a student.
I'm going to tell you that I don't know the answer
Okay.
to that. So.
I think what I would say to you is my understanding with the ACT in terms of what they share with you right now is the highest score that they received before they graduated. So if they took it 3 or 4 times, whatever the highest score was, that's the score that gets reported. Now, what's going to change next time is with the data that we get that will come through the state, you will actually get the measure as of April 28th. And so in that case, if you've had students that have taken the ACT prior to April 28th of their junior year, then they could have the benefit of multiple taking of the test. The data that we believe is in place for that would say, on average, a student is going to gain, if they take the test twice, will gain about a point. So there's not a huge differential there, but there is obviously some benefit for the student having taken the ACT test more than once before they take it on the 20th of April. But right now, the data we have, and it's for about 81 or 82% of our kids right now take the ACT. It's going to be whatever their highest score was before they graduate, because it's always, for 2014, is students that are there or have completed all the testing by the end of the 2013-2014 year. Next year, it'll be different. The other thing we know, and we're sharing that with the department right now, is that we know when we move from 82% of our kids taking the test to 100% of our kids taking the test, the data from other states would say that we'll see a 2 to 3 point drop in terms of scores. And we're saying to the department, you need to get out in front of this to talk to the community and to state stakeholders about this, because the last thing we want is to have school districts being beaten up about our ACT score went down, when basically it's just simply that we are now measuring a group of about 20% of the kids that have never taken an ACT and probably had not even thought about taking an ACT. We, I think, are going to be in an advantageous position because we probably are about 8 percentage points higher in terms of the percent of our kids that currently take the ACT over what the state percentage is. But what we know is those states that have moved to using the ACT as a measure for all kids, their scores tend to go down 2 to 3 points, and we will no longer be the state that has the highest ACT scores in the country. So we know that piece is sitting out there right now, that we have to deal with that. And but at the same time, we really believe strongly that having every kid take the ACT, whether they're looking at a certificate program, 2-year program, 4-year program, whatever, having that in place gives them a much better sense of how they can do in any kind of post-secondary programming. And so we want to get there with that data. But it is going to be different, and the scores are going to change, and people will traditionally, how we've dealt with the media in the past is they will grab that score, they will compare it with the score from this year, and just like back in 2012-13, when they compared our reading scores, when they changed the test, the hue and cry in the media level will be, scores plummet. Well, scores really are not plummeting. Scores basically are just adjusting to the fact that 100% of the kids will take the test. We also know that there's some argument from at least one district that shall remain nameless, just very close to us, who somehow thinks they shouldn't have to take the test, or that they should not have to have kids take the test if they've already taken it. Well, the reality is, if you remember when this was passed by the legislature, the focus was we want to actually replace the high school MCAs with the ACT to explore the plan. Somewhere that got derailed. We think it got derailed because of the fact that the department and the state and the feds disagreed on whether the ACT measured all the different standards that we have in Minnesota. And because they do not believe that the ACT measures every single standard that we have in English language and in mathematics, they are basically saying, no, you get to take both tests. So instead of doing what we planned to do, which was to see a reduction in the number of overall tests kids took, and taking tests that were much more likely to have kids motivated to do well in them because they actually could have an impact on their college or community college or any kind of post-secondary program, we're now going to hit them with both. And frankly, I think there's a strong possibility we'll see MCA scores continue to go down because kids are saying, number one, I'm worn out taking tests. Number two, now I'm taking 2 tests. So,
And one
all right.
doesn't count.
And I'm off the soapbox, but the MCAs don't count for anything except creating an MMR score and a Z-score and looking at academic gaps. So all that is stirring, my folks and my friends.
Julie?
Well, I just had one other question. Does World Best Workforce, do they require all of this then to be added to our online reporting of, so that, would that be
I
added
think
to our
I think
website?
eventually that's where we want to go
Okay.
because I think our belief is let's show people all the different measures we have, because one of the things it very clearly demonstrates, if somebody wants to sit down and look at our site, is that you have conflicting data. You have MCA data saying one thing, MAP data saying another thing, ACT data saying another thing, and it really points to the fact that anybody that believes that a single test given in 2 hours on one day out of a 174-day school year is the sole measure of how kids are performing is, how should I say that, is probably not of clear mind. And so our belief is get it out there and share it. And again, I really applaud the work that these guys have done to get us to this point. I really like the strategy of creating a single number, again, not to be used to compare kids or compare teachers, but to make it easier for teachers then to come back and say, how do I use my benchmark testing to find out is each of my students on track to be successful? And I think that's a powerful piece. And as you said, with the other pieces we've tried to do before, we can also bury teachers in data too, and we've got to be very careful to find the right balance.
Rob, did you have another question?
Well, I was just thinking, it's just kind of an observation that maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like the things that are really low are the EL and the FRP, and the things that are really high are the AP. So it seems like these graphs show as much about income inequality as they do about achievement.
And it's why I think you see this problem across the country.
I had one question. So this is not specific to your report, but I know that you did a field trip to look at some schools, or at least one school that was doing different things for the achievement gap, and I don't know if you're prepared to make any comments now, but it would be lovely to have you share it at some point with the board.
One of the things that we also did in response to our student data was a team from the 3 elementary schools went to Columbia Heights to an elementary school that is beating the odds, that has a very high poverty rate, but a very high proficiency rate on their MCAs. And just spent several hours up there, and it was actually really fascinating and gave us some things to think about, ways we could tweak our instruction here, or even different models for handling supplemental instruction in the school. So I think you may hear some more about that in SIP presentations, actually.
Great. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for such a thorough discussion of our data. All right. We are ready to move on to our first item for individual action, which is a resolution. Minnesota State High School League Foundation grant for student participation, which is something that we have done on a fairly regular basis.
Every year for the last several years, we have asked the Minnesota High School League to provide us a foundation grant for student participation. Tom, I think, was very skillful in seeing this kind of as it first became available at the state level and has stepped in and basically asked for those resources. And we have received a grant each year, and it has definitely supported us in terms of allowing the maximum number of students from our district to participate in whatever choice of co-curricular activities they might have. So I strongly encourage that we approve the resolution.
I'll move the resolution.
Moved by Carrie.
Second.
Seconded by Julie. Any discussion? This is a roll call vote.
Scrabble.
Aye.
Hardy.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Pritchard.
Aye.
Maple.
Aye.
Clausen.
Aye.
Iverson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Very good. All right, we're ready to move on to items for consent grouping. I'll remind board members there were some additional items, personnel items added in the table file. Is there anything anyone wishes to pull from the consent grouping? I would ask for a motion to approve the consent grouping.
So moved.
Moved by John.
Second.
Seconded by Ann. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We have two items for information. The first is the enrollment report, which board members will have in the packet. Dr. Richardson, do you want to comment on
Just
it?
very briefly, again, this is one of those, and yes, it looks pretty flat again. Although, if you take a look at total numbers with the ALC in place, we actually are in a pretty strong position of 3,947 students grand total with the ALC. I think a couple things you'll notice is that since the beginning of the year, the first day of school versus October 1st, we basically have actually grown another 6 students above where we were. And again, that's a strong start. We did not see any drop-off of kids who, oftentimes we see a drop-off because students that might have been identified during the year and during the summer as still attending will come in at the last minute, or will send a letter at the last minute and say, I need to have my records sent somewhere else. We just didn't see that drop off at all. So again, we're sitting at a very solid number. The other thing, however, I think you'll notice if you take a look at our class sizes, I think are really solid and supportive. You'll notice that really there's no elementary class above 28 students. And we have a number of classes, especially at the lower elementary, where we have classes of 19 and 20 students. So I think we've been able to maintain a really good situation for our primary age students in terms of size, and we've continued to be able to maintain class sizes still significantly under 30 for all buildings, and I think that's a really positive place for us to be right now.
All right, very good. Our next item for information is the update on the district master facilities planning process.
Matt, I will just say this. Matt has done a fantastic job with implementing this process across the buildings and in working with parents. We have now, as of this evening, have completed 10 of 17.
18.
18 meetings. What we do know is that we're going to continue to need to look at other strategies to support getting data back from parents, because what we are finding is parent numbers have been small. And we've mused about that as to what might be the reason. I think our final thought is there's really no crisis, exactly what Matt's been describing to folks as we present this to staff and to parents. There is no crisis. We're in a position of strength. We're in a great place to build a district master facilities plan, and because of that, there's really not a great deal of angst among parents to say, you know, you need to come fix this or this needs to be addressed. So we are going to need to look at some other strategies, I think probably in terms of survey strategies, to help us get a broader sense of what's going on there. Matt, why don't you just share with them a little bit about kind of the process that you use? And again, I just want to applaud him because I've been along for the ride mainly on this. I've been, you know, in each of the meetings and there to support and help and pass out and cajole and talk to parents and staff at different tables. But Matt has basically done the presentation, and so why don't you just share with them a little bit about how that's going?
Sure, we've got the presentation down to about 5.5 minutes, if really need be. Actually, we did our really quick version at Greenville Park for the one parent that arrived. But basically what happens is we welcome people as they come in, trying to generally welcome people at the door, make them feel comfortable, whether it be staff or families. And then basically we give a very short presentation which talks about what is a master facilities plan. It talks about why we're interested in doing a master facilities plan. That's the point where we talk about most districts are doing this in crisis. The fire marshal has said you're shutting down if you don't do something. People are growing too much. None of that here. We share information from Hazel Reinhardt's study, and we focus on two numbers. We focus on the 200 student decline over the next 10 years that Hazel shared with us, though we said some people liberally might call that flat, but we're going to call it a modest decline. And we share the fact that I think is a key statistic from her presentation, that the 47% of the single-family detached homes in Northfield, which we know are our bread and butter, have one resident age 55 or older, and that really squares with us that, you know, we're not going to be seeing a huge boom over the next decade. We talk about the facility analysis and what ATS&R has done so far, and that they've come back and said our facilities are in very good condition. We share just a couple of other pieces. And then we get them into small groups. It has ranged. In some groups we've had one group because it's been small enough that we could, for example, at our ALC, even with the staff, we had one group. We've had as many as probably 10 groups maybe, when we think about the high school in terms of that large staff that had come together. We've had excellent participation in our staff meetings, really well attended, lots of what I would have called in my teaching days as good noise, lots of really thoughtful, and I would say 360-degree looks at the facility from my perspective as how I relate to the building, and then also some global perspectives. We would have wished that we'd have more parent participation at this point. Skylar has been very effective for us over since we've had it to get people to things. Even in these particular cases tonight, where we had our highest number, I think I counted, was it 6
I think
or
we
8?
had 6 that weren't us.
Right. And you know, Mr. Lear included a reminder to families yesterday when he reminded them about both Mr. Sanis and Mrs. Antoine have reminded families about our meetings tomorrow. And, you know, we're partnering those with PTO events tomorrow night, bookending at the front and the back. And then we've got the one on the 28th is just before an orchestra choir concert at the middle school. We do have another piece that we share is we have this QR code that we bring. And Julie, I did bring it back. You had mentioned the one meeting I didn't use it, and we brought it back. And so we have QR codes around that people can scan at the end with a SurveyMonkey tool, that if there's something they forgot or on their way home or they're in the shower and they remember something, they can go in and do that. And then I think we just have to make a decision as to whether we send that survey out to all families as a follow-up once we are completed with the face-to-face meetings. Right now we've been looking at it as a supplement to the meeting, someone who's forgotten something of those, but we're discussing whether or not to send out. And we actually do have a question in the survey itself that asks, did you attend a meeting or not? Because we do think that there might be some differences when I'm doing this collaboratively, like we are in these small groups versus individually. The sheet's just it's a sheet that's got 3 columns on it and says, what do you think works well at this facility? And we talk about the grounds and all parking and all that kind of stuff. What doesn't work well? And the third thing is we call it the magic wand question. If you had a magic wand, what would you do differently at this facility to support teaching and learning? And it's pretty basic. You'd be shocked at how much data we can collect in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes is the max, really. What we found, after 20 minutes, people start to weave into other pieces, and we monitor those groups. And I think so far it has been, actually it's more successful than I even had anticipated it would be. I really feel very good about the data that we've gotten. It will be interesting as we look at with ATS&R in terms of the breadth of opinions that we have, and it will be interesting to see how we formulate that into a master facilities plan for you to consider.
And the feedback we're hearing from staff has been they feel listened to, they feel respected, they know that we're doing this on the front end of really making any kinds of decisions. The interesting one tonight was we had one of our parents who said, well, I'm not going to tell you what I think this meeting is going to be about, but I'll tell you when we're done. And when we finished the meeting, we came over and asked her, was this meeting what you thought it was going to be? She said, no, I thought you were going to try to talk me into something. And she said, no, you wanted us to tell you what we thought. I said, exactly. And so, I think the good thing about this is people are really getting an opportunity to share their thoughts. And because of the questions, the way they're framed, everybody has answers. It isn't technical. It isn't at the level of, well, you have to know, that, well, we need to do, this tuck pointing on this part of the building. But it's really framed around things that they can get their hands around. We're hearing a lot about security issues. We're hearing a lot about space issues. We're hearing a lot about people concerned about natural light. But, that's a very broad range of things. And storage. And we also, we have some people who I think naturally gravitate to, how does this impact me directly? And so theirs are very much more focused and tight on their particular situation, while others are much bigger picture thinkers in terms of looking at a broad piece. But that's the natural, thing that's going to happen when you ask a large group of folks. So when we get done, we're going to have, I'd say somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 people who will have responded between staff and parents.
And that's before we send the survey out.
And that's before we do any surveying. So I think we're going to have some really good data to send off to ATS&R.
Just a couple. We have had a number of people who have come in and half jokingly, but I think pretty seriously say, oh, you guys already have a plan, right? This is just to kind of go through the motions. And I think when people get into the questions, they realize we don't have a plan. I mean, we are really developing a plan, and I think that's really fresh air for a lot of folks. And the other piece we'd be remiss, Danita is just doing an excellent job of taking this vast array of stuff and transcribing it. We always talk to people about giving us their best handwriting, but what we're doing is we had initially thought about just giving back the actual sheets. But then we felt, as we looked at it, we have all those, and they're available at just the pieces that we found that it was probably more user-friendly to transcribe the pieces. And in the cases of the buildings, we're actually sending that transcription out the next day or within about 2 days of when the building happened to staff. But we can't do that with the community people at this point, but we're sending it back almost like board minutes. And we're saying, if there's anything you think we need to correct, please do so. And so far, we have not had anyone who has suggested we need to correct anything. But you'll see also that we added a meeting since the last time we talked for coaches. There's a number of site issues around the different athletic and performance spaces in the building that most of our coaches have not been able to attend the meetings after school or before school because of coaching duties and those pieces. So we have set it up as an optional meeting on the workshop day on November 3rd. And that's all coaches, in terms of from the performing arts to athletics activities. All coaches who are involved in our activities program are invited to that. We think that's going to be a real important segment to get some feedback from as well.
Because I think the other piece with coaches is oftentimes a coach uses practice or play facilities that are not necessarily at the building that they work at. So while they may have been involved in their buildings piece, it really was focused on what was happening in their building. And this, I think, will give them an opportunity to share, here's where I practice, here's where I work with kids on this particular activity. And so I think that'll give them an opportunity to really focus in on what they're finding in terms of the ability of those facilities to really support the kids. Okay.
All right. Very good. With that, we are looking at future meetings. The next meeting will be Monday, October 27th, and then remind board members that the November 10th meeting will be at the regular time of 7 p.m., but we'd like board members at the upper cafeteria at 6:15 for the National Merit Scholars Reception. So with that, I would ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Noel. Second. Seconded by Carrie. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
One student at a time. Right now, I'm going to take you through a math case study to further understand how we examine the learning of an individual in order to plan for the most effective